Okay, we're up to one of our major guests that I know you're really looking forward to, and I'm thrilled to introduce him to the stage and honoured and a little bit scared. I didn't know what hat to wear because I will be introducing Dr. Edward de Bono. And who better to open today's collection of presentations on your creative potential, which is something that I think we're all really interested in here. Creative potential, human potential, and our emotional potential. Now, he needs no introduction, but it's really worth listening to it again just to be reminded of how astonishing this man actually is. Edward de Bono is one of the world's leading authorities in the field of creative thinking. That's before anybody even knew what creative thinking was. He basically, I don't know whether he invented creative thinking, but he made us creative enough to think about creative thinking. Now, he's renowned for his the development of the 6 thinking hats technique and also the direct attention thinking tools framework. He's the originator of the concept and the formal tools of lateral thinking, which is now a part of language enjoying an entry in the Oxford Dictionary. I mean, talk about make a mark on your world. He's written over 70 books with translations into 40 languages and has been invited to lecture in 58 countries. That is one hell of a passport. And I was with him yesterday, as many, who was in the workshop yesterday? Wasn't it fabulous with him? And look, you've got to love a guy who says, it's not a mistake, it's a fully justified venture that for reasons beyond control did not succeed. Please give him a big warm round of applause and welcome to the stage to present How to Have a Beautiful Mind, the beautiful man himself, Dr. Edward de Bono.
Good morning to all. I'm going to tell you an extraordinary story. It's an Australian story, and it's from the world of science and medicine. And there's a condition called peptic ulcer, and that means a stomach ulcer or duodenal ulcer. If you had this unfortunate condition, you might be on antacid medicines for 20, even 50 years. You might lose your stomach, removed by surgery. You had a very restricted diet. You couldn't have coffee, you couldn't have alcohol, and so on. In other words, it was a pretty miserable life. Then a doctor in West Australia, his name was J.B. Marshall, I think, he said, maybe a peptic ulcer is an infection. Everyone roared with laughter and said, don't be stupid. The very strong acid in the stomach could kill any bug. Anyway, eventually he proved his point after having given himself an ulcer. And today, the treatment of an ulcer, instead of 20 to 50 years on antacids or losing your stomach and so on and so on, today, all that you need is antibiotics for 1 week. It's one of the most extraordinary changes in medicine. Now, the reason I'm telling that story is that this doctor, J.B. Marshall, thought of possibility. That's the key word, possibility. Now, in science, of course, scientists are trained not to think of possibilities. Because if you think of possibilities, people think you go back to the days of witchcraft, where everything is possible and so on and so on. So scientists are told, no, stick only to what is likely, hypothesis, facts, and so on, no possibilities. Now, it's the same with our thinking in general, because at the Renaissance, in the Middle Ages, schools, universities, thinking were in the hands of the church. And when Greek thinking came into Europe, that's Greek thinking of the Gang of Three, Aristotle, Plato, Socrates, they wanted thinking to find the truth. The use of that being to prove heretics wrong and to support the belief system. So we developed very good thinking for finding the truth. But culturally, we have never actually developed thinking for creating value. Individuals have, to be sure, entrepreneurs, innovators, and so on, but culturally never. And that's very key. And that is also to do with possibility. In other words, education is all about the right answer. The whole of school is there to say, this is the right answer. You must get the right answer. Well, that's useful, nothing wrong with that. We need the right answer. You need how to drive on the road. You need how to add up the groceries, whatever. The right answer is very important, but it's not sufficient. It's all like saying, what is the purpose of a house? The purpose of a house is ultimately to protect you from the rain and the wind. But how many of you live in houses that only protect you from the rain and wind? The answer is no one. It's what else is added to that which creates value. So certainly finding the truth is very important, but it's not enough. We need also to think of possibilities. Now that's what gives you a beautiful mind, possibility. That suppose you are in a situation and someone seems very aggressive or something. In your mind, you say, yes, possibly he's an aggressive person, possibly he's insecure, possibly there's something which has upset him. You think of all the possibilities. And that is eventually what gives you a beautiful mind, to think of possibilities. Not just this is the right answer, not just judgment, but elaborating around possibilities. It doesn't mean you're always going to be right, no, perhaps not. But in any situation, you see things more fully. Instead of having a mind which just goes like that, you've got a mind which goes like that, like that. In other words, opening up possibilities. So that's a very key part of thinking, not just how do you get to the right answer as quickly as possible. You need to get to the right answer, and you can do it as quickly as possible, but don't stop there. Think of possibilities. That's why, for example, and I was talking about it yesterday, the argument system which was developed by the ancient Greeks, A argues with B, and each one is trying to prove the other wrong. Not trying to develop new ideas or anything of the sort, just trying to prove the other person wrong, which is a very, very limited form of thinking. So instead of that, there's the 6 hats, which some of you know about. 6 hats means as you sit thinking, there are 6 different colored hats which you can wear, and each one indicates the mode of thinking. So for the white hat, the mode is information. What is the information? How do we get it? What do we need? Questions we want to ask. The red hat, you express your intuition, your feelings, emotions, and so on. The black hat is the normal critical hat. What's wrong, why it won't work, and so on. The yellow hat is values. Values, benefit, positive aspects. Then we have the green hat, which is creativity. And finally, the blue hat is the organizing hat. You can use them in any sequence you like. And that's very widely used. It's used by 4-year-olds in school. It's used by board members of some of the largest corporations in the world. In New York, one of my trainers was teaching juries and law courts to use it. Using the hats, they reach unanimous decisions very quickly. The judges were so impressed that in at least 3 states now, the judge can order that the jury be trained in the 6 hats. It's a big change in thinking after 2,400 years. Now, there's a word I was mentioning yesterday as well, a word which is really needed. The word is Ebne, E-B-N-E. Ebne means excellent, but not enough. Now, the reason being that in our traditional dialectic system, A is argument with B. B has to say A is right, and I agree with him, fine, or A is wrong, and we've got to change or remove that. There's no way of saying, yes, that is excellent, but not enough. Now, the reason there has been no way for 2,400 years is that if you're dealing with the truth, you can't have excellent but not enough. You either have the truth or you don't have the truth. So that word could never exist. But if you're dealing with operations, doing things, making something happen, carrying out tasks, then very often you can say that is excellent but not enough. It doesn't mean it's bad, it means it's excellent but not enough. And that's why we have never invented a word like that for 2,400 years, because we have believed that the purpose of thinking is simply to find the truth. I have no problem with that. The purpose of thinking is to find the truth, but that is ebna. That is excellent, but not enough. The purpose of thinking is also to create value. And of course, that's where creativity comes in as well. That purpose of creativity is to change, to make things better, and the most significant behavior of the brain is humor. I doubt if any philosopher has ever said that, but humor is the most significant behavior because humor indicates an asymmetric patterning system. Now, all patterning systems are asymmetric. You go from A to B, that is the definition of a pattern. But you can also go from C to A, but not from A to C. That's why it's asymmetric. All patterning systems are like that. What happens in humor is you're taken down this strand, then you're suddenly moved here, and in hindsight, yes, that's obvious. That's what makes something amusing. The example I always use, indeed I'd used yesterday, and I apologize to those who were there yesterday as well. An old man of 90 goes to hell, and he wanders around, he sees a friend of his, also age 90, sitting there with a beautiful young blonde sitting on his knee. So he says to his friend, "Are you sure this is hell? Because you seem to be having rather a good time." The friend looks up and says, "No, no," he says, "it's hell all right." He said, "I'm the punishment for her." In other words, once you're there, it's absolutely logical. And that's what happens with creativity. With creativity, we make the effort to move laterally, that's where lateral comes from, laterally, out of the existing channel to new channels. Once we're there in hindsight, it makes sense. And there are various formal techniques and processes for doing that. Things like challenge, which means we say, yes, the existing idea is fine, but for the moment, we put it aside and see if we can develop alternatives. And then things like, what is the concept here? How else can we deliver the concept? And then provocation. Provocation upsets a lot of traditional philosophers and logicians, because in provocation, you can say something which sounds absolutely daft and impossible. So one time in California, I was talking to the ecology group, about 500 people. They said, we have a problem with rivers. Factory on the river puts out pollution, people downstream suffer. What can we do about that? So as a provocation, I suggested PO, which is a word I invented, meaning provocative operation. PO, the factory, is downstream of itself. That sounds pretty impossible. How can the factory be there and there at the same time? From it comes a very, very simple idea, which is now legislation in a number of countries, that if you build a factory on the river, your input must be downstream of your own output. So you're the first to get your pollution. Very obvious, very logical, could have been thought of 100 years ago, but wasn't. So provocation is a way of getting new ideas, escaping you from the main channel. So having a beautiful mind involves opening up, elaborating possibilities, creativity. It's the opposite of being dogmatic and arrogant and sure and only looking for the right answer. I'm not against looking for the right answer, by all means find it, but don't limit your thinking just to say, this is the way it is, this is the way it has to be. So opening things up and opening possibilities. So if you're involved in an argument with someone, you make an effort to say, okay, let me get inside that person's mind. What is that person thinking? Why do they take that point of view? Is there anything interesting in what he or she is saying? What are the values behind it? In other words, an effort to understand rather than an effort to argue and attack. And that makes for a much more beautiful mind. In other words, exploring. Exploration is a key word. exploration, possibilities, in general, opening things up rather than closing things down. Our normal habits of thinking in education is closing things down. What is the right answer here? What is this? As opposed to what are the possibilities? Possibilities. And that should be much more the case in science. There are a lot of things which could do with better thinking in science, and people looking at possibilities. But the reason they don't is they say, as I mentioned before, they say that's what happened with witchcraft, where everything was possible and we never made any progress. And that's true. That's true. You need to keep a balance. It's rather like if you've got tomato ketchup and you want to put it on your French fries, you put on a certain amount. You don't smother it in it. So you've got to keep a balance with possibilities and certainty by all means. But don't feel embarrassed about possibilities, because possibilities are important. So let's give you a very simple exercise. And imagine we were using the 6 hats, and we'll start with the white hat. White hat's for information. And let's take a subject. Let's take a subject about buses. And we want some new ideas about buses. And we'll start with the white hat. And for the white hat, just for 1 minute with your neighbor, just discuss some of your experience of buses. So your experience of buses, just for 1 minute. Okay. Okay. We'll move on to the next hat, the red hat. Just your feelings, your experience of buses, what you feel about buses. You have 30 seconds for that, because all you need to do is express your feeling. Okay, we'll have a green hat now, creativity, and we'll put in a provocation. All buses should be half the size they are at the moment. Now from that you want to move on to develop some new idea. So you have 1 minute on that. Okay, now the yellow hat on any idea you've thought of, the benefits, the values of that idea. 1 minute, yellow hat on any idea you've thought of. Okay, now the black hat. In general, it always makes sense to use the yellow before the black, because if the black hat, the negatives are very strong, you don't make much effort to find the values. So usually yellow before black. 1 minute, black hat. The bad points, the negatives on the idea you've thought of. Okay, and finally the blue hat to put together the outcome, the summary of your thinking, and again 1 minute to put together the outcome of your thinking. Okay. Now, the key thing, of course, about the hats is when it's used in a meeting, everyone at any moment is wearing the same hat. And there's a physiological reason for it, because the hypothalamus in the brain releases certain chemicals depending on your mood, which sensitize different areas of the brain. And so if you don't have a way of changing a mood, then you just usually have the negative mode, which isn't enough. Now, just a final point, the relationship between intelligence and thinking, and it's rather like the relationship between a motor car and the driver. Intelligence is like the horsepower of a car. Thinking is like the skill of the driver. So you can have a highly intelligent person who's not actually a good thinker. Maybe good at understanding things, yes, but not very good at doing things. Or you may have a less intelligent person who's a better driver. The other danger of high intelligence is the arrogance which goes with it, where someone uses their intelligence simply to defend their point of view, never to explore other points of view or open up possibilities. So I've got 1 minute to go, so thank you all very much.